Back here on the show now to discuss the other side of the coin, if you will, when it comes to the postseason. We got wins, and we also got to talk about the losses. And with those losses, when we get to this stage of football, all the margins are so thin, everything is so calculated, and everything is so measured that any sort of misstep, any sort of error is always amplified a lot more, and becomes evident a lot of the times in these games where it's back and forth, defenses are getting stops, offenses are responding to each other, but then it just takes one drop or one turnover or just as a collective not being able to stop something and being able to overcome it in the game as well, or being out of your element and not feeling comfortable and just looking outside of yourself basically. So much of that is placed on the quarterback in this day and age as well, right? Because they're the highest paid, they're the ones that draw the most eyes, and really, they're the ones that these teams, these offenses build their entire systems around, right? If you're one of those guys. So, because the quarterback position is so amplified now, more so than I think even before, even though obviously the responsibilities are the same, but I just feel like nowadays the quarterback is just a lot more important, I feel like now. So there's two outcomes to that, right? Because for all the wins and all the praise that the quarterbacks get, they also face a lot of the criticism in the losses. So we have four losing quarterbacks here that we're going to rank them just based on the amount of blame that they should get for these losses. And I think with the losses, it's not just all on them, but we got to talk about, just the fact that they contributed to it, right? And looking at all four of these guys, who contributed to a loss more is, being compared to who contributed less. So with that, out there now, we're going to start with number four. And number four, I have CJ Stroud, the quarterback that I felt least contributed to the loss on Saturday when they played the Chiefs. I gave him like a score of 3 out of 10. I felt like CJ outperformed when I really thought about it in this context, right? I thought that CJ outperformed any expectations that I had for him because of, a second year that didn't go as planned. Obviously, after last year, you thought that they'd take another step, maybe make it further this year in the playoffs, especially with Diggs coming in and Mixon and Nico Collins, Danielle Hunter all coming in. You thought that this team was ready to take that next step, and I really thought so too. But with the injuries and the offensive line that really showed no progression from last year heading into this year, that made it pretty lackluster and pretty disappointing. But with that being said, for the Texans to get this far and for the kind of performance that CJ threw out there on Saturday in Arrowhead of all places against the reigning Super Bowl champions, I thought he really deserved the least amount of blame out of any of these quarterbacks because he made a lot of great throws. I thought he made a lot of good decisions with the football, when to keep it, when to throw it, when to escape the pocket and make, those extracurricular plays. I thought he made all the right choices. And unfortunately for me, it was just all about the offensive line, unfortunately. While CJ made as many plays as he could, you can only make so many. And George Karlaftis got to him 3 times. Total, the Chiefs sacked him 8 times as well. So it was unfortunate to see, CJ trying his best, but just the protection just wasn't there against the Chiefs. So that is something that they're going to have to improve a lot this offseason. But for the silver lining in all of this, I thought CJ, to kind of regroup everything of this season and play his best ball in this game, that's encouraging, at least going forward. It's not like he took a major step back or anything like that. I just felt like they ran into a couple more hurdles this year, and they didn't catch a lot of people by surprise. So, all in all, I thought CJ was one of the ones that really didn't contribute that much overall to a loss this divisional round, and that brings us to number 3 on this list. The second quarterback that doesn't deserve as much blame is Matthew Stafford for me. I gave him a 5 out of 10 on the scale because much like CJ, I thought the offense was working pretty efficiently versus a very good defense in Philadelphia on the road for the most part. That game was pretty close throughout the entirety of the game, and it never felt like the Rams were really out of it yeah, the Eagles might have scored first, and yeah, the Eagles might have had a lead multiple times in the game for maybe an extended period, but still, it felt like because you had Stafford, because you had this offense, that you were still in this game. And I was a bit disappointed with how the weather altered their performance, right? I wish that that wasn't so evident in the play of Stafford and really this offense, because we saw Kyron fumble. We saw them just look very lethargic and just sloppy out there when the weather got a lot more severe, I guess you could say. And with that came the turnovers, right? And unfortunately, Matthew Stafford fumbled the ball when they already had fumbled the ball and they only held them to 3 points. Then they go back and they fumble the ball again. So I thought that was a big mistake by the Rams, of course, unintentionally, but it still contributed to it, right? If you gave up one turnover, fine, all right, that's okay. But then you give up another one at that stage of the game, I thought that was pretty big. So Matthew Stafford, despite all the good that he did in this game, I gave him a 5 out of 10 because also their run defense was okay at some points, but you still gave up those long touchdowns to Saquon and also to Jalen Hurts. So I felt like that could have been better as well. But Matthew Stafford not really getting too much of the blame from me for this sort of loss. And number 2 on my list, I got Lamar Jackson. I got Lamar Jackson as the second quarterback that holds, the second most amount of blame in this divisional round for the elimination of their team. And I gave him a 7 out of 10 because even though he played great at the end of that game to get back into a spot where they really could have won the game or at least tied it, it's hard to ignore the 2 turnovers, right? Obviously. And again, having those 2 turnovers is huge, and I can't ignore them, right? Because one of them led directly to a touchdown for the Bills. So this was only a 2-point game. You take away 7 points for the Bills. Obviously, you can do the math. So that was obviously huge, and that was a big swing point, I felt like. And really, it's more of a credit to the Ravens for being able to overcome that. But still, I can't just see past it despite the fact of how close the game was in the end. And the first half overall also wasn't very good for this offense. They only put up 10 points and they were down 21-10 in that first half as well. And a majority of that falls on Lamar as well. So that was the negative side of it, but you also can't ignore the fact that they were in a position to win and Mark Andrews fumbles the ball at midfield. And also, he has a 2-point conversion and he just simply drops it. And yes, it's tough and it's like he's going to get so much criticism for that. And I guess I won't say rightly so because, he probably feels terrible about it and things like that, but he quite literally dropped the ball. And it's unfortunate because he's one of the most trusted guys. He's one of the most trusted guys by Lamar. And the loss, again, unfairly or not, is going to end up hurting Lamar Jackson a lot more because of legacy and his talent and winning multiple MVPs, but the success not being there in the playoffs, right, is a big impact. It has a big impact on his legacy. So yes, Mark Andrews made a lot of, contributions to this loss, obviously, but Lamar also holds a pretty good chunk of the blame in this one as well. But just not as much as Jared Goff. I thought Jared Goff, to me, in terms of blame for losing in the divisional round, I gave him an 8 out of 10 because nothing really went well for this offense. And there was a lot of turnovers, obviously, in this game. And yeah, he had 4 of them. 4 of the turnovers were from Jared Goff. He had that fumble in that first half. He had the pick 6. He had another interception in the first half and then another one as well to end the game. So you had 5 total turnovers and 4 of them were on you. So that's always going to be tough to overcome. And they just dug themselves in too deep of a hole, I thought, with those turnovers specifically, to really come out of it and come back from this game. It was just too much, right? They hurt themselves too much to really be competitive. Unfortunately, at home against a 6 seed, right, that you felt the Lions were capable of defeating that day. But some of the blame also gets amplified a little bit more from me because, Jared Goff was having a great year so far this year, or really at one point this year where he had that crazy completion percentage run where he was completing almost all of his passes, and he was on a crazy, historical streak at one point in this year. He was part of the leading scoring offense in the NFL. He got them to 15 wins as well, and I just feel like they needed to come out more engaged, and we needed to see that right from the get go. And I thought they were too slow getting into this game, and then by the time they did, they were already losing. So I never really felt like they had a true opportunity to make a comeback at this thing, especially with all those turnovers. And the defense didn't play, lights out or anything like that. They couldn't stop anything in regards to the Commanders, but they were dealing with a lot of injuries and things like that, and it's not an excuse, but it's just a fact that they didn't have all their players. But really, their offense didn't complement their defense enough, and certainly their defense didn't complement their offense enough. So based on all of that and the fact that Jared Goff, did throw or commit 4 of those turnovers, it's hard to look past that as really having anybody else have more blame on this loss than him. So again, it is unfortunate to say, but it is major talking points, especially when we talk about the 4 teams that won in the previous segment and how they played up to a standard that they didn't make a mistake, they didn't hurt themselves. And, highlighting these quarterbacks in this segment now is not so much just to criticize them, but just to amplify that point more, that making 1 turnover, and especially making 4 or 3 or something like that, is just not going to get you far in these playoffs. It's just not. And it's a high standard, obviously, but it is what it feels like the NFL is kind of turning to now. So that's really the point behind that segment overall. But we got a couple more to get to on today's show. One of them is in regards to Jaden Daniels. His historical first year in the NFL continues to go until the NFC Championship at least. So is this the best rookie season ever that we witnessed in the NFL's history, or could it be the best season just in general that most of us my age or younger have seen so far? I think it's a valid question, and I'm going to explain myself and why I think it's already the best rookie season ever when we return after this.